I didn't expect my professor to see me kissing a guy behind a closed bookstore on a Friday night. And I definitely didn't expect him to look at me the way he did. Up until that moment, George Edward was just Professor Edward. Crisp shirts, perfectly timed lectures, that calm, analytical voice that made even the most boring political theory sound important. He was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. Always composed. Always distant. The kind of man who never blurred lines. And then he saw me outside the university. Saw me in a way he never should have. Started like any other week. Midterms were coming up, and Professor Edward was pushing us hard. He taught contemporary ethics, which sounded harmless until you realized he enjoyed dismantling your entire belief system in front of 30 students. I sat in the third row. Not too close, not invisible either. He knew my name. Interesting take, Daniel, he'd say, leaning back against his desk, arms crossed, eyes locked on mine a second longer than necessary. It was probably nothing. Professors make eye contact. That's their job. Still, I noticed things. The way his voice softened when he corrected me instead of outright challenging me like he did with others. The way his gaze lingered when I stayed after class to ask questions. The way he once adjusted his glasses and said, "You're sharper than you think." Like it meant something more. I had a boyfriend at the time. Or something like one. Leo. We weren't serious. Mostly late-night meetups, cheap wine, and pretending we didn't both have commitment issues. That Friday, Leo dragged me to a small art house bookstore CAF Akrotkara downtown. It was dim, cozy, full of mismatched chairs and people who looked like they wrote poetry in secret. We stayed until closing, talking about nothing important. When we stepped outside, it was cold. The street was quiet. Leo kissed me first. Casual. Familiar. Then I pulled him closer. It wasn't some dramatic movie kiss. It was warm, comfortable, a little messy. My hands were in his jacket. His fingers slid into my hair. We laughed into it. And that's when I heard my name. Daniel. I froze. Leo pulled back, confused. I turned slowly. And there he was. George Edward. Standing maybe 15 feet away under a flickering street lamp, holding what looked like a paper bag of books. His coat was dark, collar slightly raised against the wind. His expression wasn't angry. It was surprised. But not the kind of surprise that disappears quickly. Our eyes locked. I felt my stomach drop so fast it was like missing a stair in the dark. "Professor," I said automatically, because apparently my brain likes humiliation. Leo glanced between us. "You know him?" "He's my professor," I muttered. George stepped closer, slow, composed. Too composed. "I didn't realize you were local," he said, voice calm but different. Not lecture voice. Not classroom voice. Softer. "I live 10 minutes from here," I replied. There was a beat. A strange one. Leo shifted awkwardly. "Well," George said finally, clearing his throat slightly. "Small city." His eyes flicked briefly to Leo. Assessing. Not judgmental. Just observing. "I won't keep you," he added. He should have left then. It would have been normal. Clean. But instead, he looked back at me and held my gaze for a second too long. And in that second, something shifted. Not in a dramatic, thunderstrike way. More like a quiet click of a lock turning. "Have a good night, Daniel." He said my name like he was testing how it felt outside a classroom. Then he walked away. Leo let out a breath. "That was weird." "Yeah," I said, though weird wasn't the word. The rest of the night felt off. Leo tried to joke about it, but my mind kept replaying that look. Not disgust. Not disapproval. Curiosity. And something else I didn't want to name. Monday came too fast. I almost skipped class. Instead, I walked in 5 minutes late, hoping to slip into my seat unnoticed. But of course, he noticed. George paused mid-sentence when I entered. "Nice of you to join us, Daniel." Polite smile. Professional tone. But his eyes were sharper now. I sat down, heat creeping up my neck. The lecture continued, but it felt different. Every time I spoke, he listened too closely. Every time he moved around the room, I was hyper-aware of where he stood. At one point, he stopped beside my desk while discussing moral accountability. Sometimes, he said, hands clasped behind his back, the most revealing parts of our identity are the ones we think we keep separate from our professional lives. A few students scribbled notes. My pulse spiked. Was that about me? I told myself I was being paranoid. After class, I packed my bag quickly. I almost made it out. Daniel, he called. Of course. I turned slowly. Yes, Professor? Stay a moment. The room emptied. The door clicked shut behind the last student. Silence settled in. He walked down from the platform, stopping a few feet away from me, close enough that I could see the faint stubble along his jaw, close enough to notice he looked slightly tired. I want to clarify something, he said calmly. What I saw Friday changes nothing in this classroom. Relief and embarrassment tangled in my chest. I didn't think it would, I replied. Good. Another pause. But, he continued, voice lowering just slightly, it did remind me that you're not just a student. That caught me off guard. I'm not. A faint hint of a smile touched his mouth. You're an adult, with a life outside these walls. My throat felt dry. Yes. His gaze held mine again. And I realized, he added carefully, that perhaps I've been viewing you too narrowly. There it was again. That shift. Subtle. Dangerous. I don't expect anything inappropriate, I said quickly, because the tension was getting too thick. He exhaled softly, almost amused. Neither do I. But the way he said it didn't calm me. It unsettled me. I told myself I was imagining it. That look, that tension, that almost smile when he said he'd been viewing me too narrowly. He was the kind of man who probably alphabetized his spice rack. But after that conversation, things didn't go back to normal. They got quieter, sharper, more intentional. The next week, he stopped calling on me as much during lectures. First, I thought it was relief. Then I realized it was worse. Because when he didn't engage me publicly, I felt his attention in other ways. Subtle glances. Pause when I entered the room. The way his jaw tightened slightly if I showed up late. And then there was Thursday. I stayed after class again, mostly out of habit. I told myself it was about the midterm essay. In reality, I just wanted to understand what had changed between us. He was erasing the board when I approached. Professor Edward? He didn't turn immediately. Yes, Daniel. I had a question about the paper topic. He capped the marker and finally faced me. Go on. I started explaining my idea, something about moral identity versus public perception. Halfway through, I realized the irony. He noticed too. His lips twitched slightly. That's an ambitious angle, he said. You don't think I can handle it? I think, he replied carefully, that you enjoy pushing boundaries that hit deeper than it should have. Academically, I added quickly. He tilted his head. I meant what I said Monday, he continued. What I saw doesn't affect your standing in this class. I know. But, he added, and there it was again, that word. It did make me reflect. On what? On how easy it is to assume we know people based on limited context. I swallowed. You assumed I was straight? His gaze didn't flinch. I didn't assume anything. I simply didn't consider it. That sounds like an assumption. A pause. Fair. His honesty disarmed me more than defensiveness would have. And does it bother you? I asked before I could stop myself. His brow furrowed slightly. Does what bother me? That I'm not who you thought I was. Something shifted in his expression. Softer. More personal. It doesn't bother me, he said quietly. It surprised me. Why? He hesitated. And that hesitation felt heavier than any answer. Because, he said finally, voice lower now, I realized I was more affected by seeing you than I should have been. There it was. Not explicit. Not inappropriate. But honest. My heart started pounding in my ears. You mean? I mean, he interrupted gently, that I'm aware of my position and my responsibilities. That was a boundary. Clear. Professional. I don't want to make things complicated, I said. Nor do I. Silence stretched. But we can acknowledge reality, he added. And what's that? That you're an intelligent, perceptive man, he said evenly. And I may have underestimated how much I noticed you. The air felt thinner. You're noticing me now, I said quietly. His jaw tightened again. A knock on the classroom door broke the moment. Another professor poked his head in to grab something. The spell snapped instantly. George stepped back, professional mask back in place. Good luck with your outline, Daniel. And just like that, I was dismissed. The following weekend, I ran into him again. This time, it wasn't accidental. At least, I don't think it was. There's a small wine bar near campus. Low lighting, quiet jazz. The kind of place students rarely go because it's too calm. I liked it for that exact reason. I was sitting alone, halfway through a glass of red, when I saw him walk in. He saw me immediately. There was a flicker of something, surprise, yes, but not discomfort. He could have turned around. He didn't. Instead, he walked over. Daniel. Professor. He gave a small, almost amused exhale. George. We're off campus. My pulse jumped at hearing my professor offer his first name. George. I repeated carefully. He nodded once, then glanced at the empty chair across from me. May I? I hesitated for half a second. Then, sure. He sat down, loosening his coat slightly. Without the classroom between us, he felt different. Less structured. More human. You come here often? He asked. Sometimes. It's quiet. Yes, he agreed. That's what I like about it. We both noticed the phrasing. What I like. Not what he likes. What we like. You didn't answer my question Thursday, I said. He met my eyes. Which one? Why it surprised you? He took a slow sip of water before answering. Because, he said, choosing his words carefully, I've always kept my professional life and my personal life compartmentalized. And I crossed compartments. Yes. And that bothered you? No. His answer came too quickly. What then? He held my gaze for a long moment. Long enough that the noise of the bar faded into the background. It intrigued me, he admitted. The word landed between us, heavy and electric. You shouldn't be intrigued by your students, I said softly. You're right. But you are. Yes. My chest felt tight. George, I would never compromise your academic standing, he said immediately, serious now. That's not negotiable. I know. But I also won't pretend that seeing you that night didn't shift something. Shift, not ignite, not explode. Shift, small, subtle, real. Leo and I aren't serious, I heard myself say. I hadn't meant to share that. His eyes flickered slightly at the name. I didn't ask. I know. Silence again. This time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was loaded. We need to be careful, he said finally. We haven't done anything. Not yet. That wasn't a threat. It wasn't a promise either. It was acknowledgement. And the way he said it made heat creep up my neck. Why did you sit down? I asked quietly. He didn't break eye contact. Because walking away felt dishonest. The honesty was what got me. Instead, he chose this. And I realized, sitting across from George Edward in that dim wine bar, that the moment he saw me outside the bookstore, he didn't just see a student. He saw a man. And now he couldn't unsee it. After that night at the wine bar, everything became deliberate. We didn't text. We didn't exchange numbers. There was no reckless leap into something we couldn't control. Instead, we returned to campus like two people pretending nothing had shifted. But it had. The following Tuesday, I walked into class and felt it immediately. The air between us was different, tighter, aware. George was mid-lecture when I entered, but his eyes flicked up for just half a second. That was all. No pause, no comment, professional. But when he asked a question about moral restraint, ironic, given the circumstances, his gaze found me. Daniel, he said evenly, what do you think defines a boundary? The room felt too warm. A boundary, I replied carefully, is only meaningful if both people recognize it. A few students nodded. Someone typed. George didn't look away. And what happens? he continued, voice steady. When two people recognize it, but are tempted to test it, my pulse jumped. That depends, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral, on whether they value the consequences. A pause. And if the consequences are complicated, then they decide if the complication is worth it. The silence in the room stretched just a fraction too long before he broke eye contact and continued the lecture. No one else noticed, but I did. I avoided the wine bar for a week. Not because I didn't want to see him, because I wanted to too much. Leo sensed something was off. We were at his apartment Friday night, half watching a show, when he muted the TV. You've been distracted all week. I've had a lot going on. Is it your professor? I froze. What? You mentioned running into him twice. You've brought him up more than you bring up me. That stung. There's nothing going on, I said quickly. Didn't say there was, Leo replied, studying me. But you look like someone who's thinking about something he shouldn't. That hit closer than I liked. Leo and I ended things that night. Not dramatically, not angrily, just honestly. We're both half in, he said. That's not fair to either of us. He was right. And as I walked home alone, I knew exactly why I'd been half in. The next time I saw George outside campus wasn't accidental. I texted the department office number listed online and asked if Professor Edward held public office hours off campus for independent research discussions. It was a stretch, but he responded through email. There's a CAF Akratkoe on Milton Street. Saturday, 3 p.m. Public setting. Formal, careful, clear. Saturday came slow. I almost didn't go. But at 2:58, I was standing outside that CAF Akratkoe, hands in my jacket pockets, trying to convince myself this was about academic guidance. He was already inside. No coat this time. Just a dark sweater, sleeves pushed up slightly, glasses low on his nose as he read something on his tablet. He looked up when I approached. Daniel, George. We both noticed the absence of titles again. You said this was about independent research, he said calmly. It is. That wasn't your only reason for coming. Direct, as always. No, I admitted. He closed the tablet slowly, gave me his full attention. We need clarity, he said. Okay. You are my student. I know. And until the semester ends, that cannot change. The finality in his tone grounded me. So we just pretend nothing's happening? I asked. Something is happening, he corrected quietly. We're acknowledging it. That's not pretending. His honesty kept disarming me. And after the semester? His jaw tightened slightly. After the semester, he repeated, like he was testing the idea in his own mind. That's 4 weeks, I said. I'm aware. Silence settled between us again. Not tense, just heavy with awareness. I broke up with Leo, I heard myself say. His expression shifted, subtle but noticeable. You don't owe me that information. I didn't do it because of you. He held my gaze. Are you sure? I hesitated. That's not the point, I said finally. No, he agreed. It isn't. A server walked past. The world continued normally around us. But our table felt suspended in something fragile. My heart pounded. Why me? I asked quietly. He didn't deflect this time. Because you challenge me, he said. Because you're observant. Because when I saw you that night, I realized I had been pretending not to notice something. What? That I look for you in a room. The admission was small, controlled, but it hit harder than anything overt. And that's new for me, he added. For you. Yes. We wait for weeks, I said. Yes. And then, his gaze softened slightly. Then we see if this still feels like more than tension. I nodded slowly. For weeks. It sounded manageable. But as I left that CF Kratka, I realized something that unsettled me more than any rule or boundary. The moment he saw me outside the university, something changed. But it wasn't just him. It was me too. And waiting for weeks wasn't going to make this easier. It was going to make it stronger. Waiting for weeks sounded simple. It wasn't. George became even more composed in class. Colder, almost. Not unkind, just precise. Measured. If anything, he treated me more strictly than before. When I made a weak argument, he dismantled it without hesitation. Your reasoning lacks structure, Daniel. A few students glanced at me sympathetically. He didn't soften it. But later, when everyone else had left, he said quietly, "You're capable of better. Don't let distraction dilute your thinking." Distraction. The word lingered between us. "You mean you?" I asked before I could stop myself. His expression barely shifted. "I mean anything that pulls you away from your potential." But his eyes told a different story. Week 2 was worse. The way his voice lowered when he was emphasizing a point. The faint crease between his brows when he concentrated. And he noticed things about me too. One afternoon, as I was packing my bag, he said casually, "You've started sitting closer." I froze. "I didn't realize." "You did." His tone wasn't accusing, just observant. "Does it bother you?" He stepped down from the platform slowly. "No." That single word did more damage than if he'd said yes. By week 3, it wasn't just tension. It was anticipation. We had stopped pretending we weren't counting down. After class one evening, the campus was nearly empty. It had rained earlier, and everything smelled clean and cold. I was halfway down the hallway when I heard his footsteps behind me. "Daniel." I stopped. He rarely followed me out of the classroom. "Yes." He glanced around. No one nearby. "Walk with me." Not a request. We stepped outside together, the sky already dark. "This is inappropriate," I said quietly. "Yes," he agreed, but he didn't slow down. We walked side by side across the nearly empty quad. "You seem restless," he observed. "I am." "Because of this?" "Yes." He nodded slightly, as if he respected the honesty. "I don't want you distracted from your exams," he said. "I'm not distracted from exams." A small pause. "I'm distracted from sleeping." That got his attention. He exhaled slowly. "Daniel." The way he said my name low, controlled, made my stomach tighten. "You're not a boy," he said. "You know what you're stepping toward." "I do." "And you're certain?" "Yes." We stopped walking. The campus lights cast soft shadows across his face. Silence. "Then why?" he asked. "Because you see me. Because you don't treat me like a joke. Because when you look at me, it feels intentional." But what I said was, "Because when you saw me that night, you didn't look away." Something shifted in his expression. "And you didn't either," he replied. That was true. We stood there for a moment. Finally, he stepped back first. "2 weeks," he said quietly. "2 weeks," I echoed. The final week was torture. Every class felt charged. Every glance held meaning. We stopped speaking after lectures unless necessary. It was safer that way. But on the last day, the final exam review, something changed. The classroom emptied slowly. I stayed seated. He finished organizing papers at his desk. "Congratulations," he said without looking up. "You've done well this semester." "Is that it?" I asked. He looked up then. "That's what you earned." I stood slowly, walking down toward him. "This is the last class," I said. "Yes. I'm not your student after today." His jaw tightened. "Grades aren't finalized. That's technical. And technicalities matter." I stopped a few feet from his desk. "Are you going to hide behind that?" His eyes flashed slightly, not anger. Frustration. "I'm not hiding," he said evenly. "I'm ensuring this begins clean." Begins. Not ends. Begins. My pulse spiked. "And when will it be clean enough?" I asked quietly. He stepped around the desk. "When your grade is submitted," he said. "When there's no question of influence. When this is entirely your choice and entirely mine." "It already is." He looked at me like he was fighting something internal. "You have no idea," he said softly, "how difficult it's been not to do this." My breathing felt shallow. "Then don't," I whispered. His hand dropped immediately. A muscle jumped in his jaw. "1 more week," he said firmly. "After grades are submitted. And then," his gaze darkened slightly, not with authority. with intent. Then, he said quietly, I take you to dinner, as George. Not Professor Edward. George. The week after finals felt longer than the entire semester. We didn't see each other. No accidental hallway encounters. No lingering glances. No tension-filled lectures. Just silence. And it was worse, because now there was nothing buffering what we both knew was coming. I checked the university portal more times than I'd ever admit. When my final grade posted and my chest tightened, it was done. Clean. No technicalities left. An hour later, I got an email from George Edward. No subject line. Just, grades are finalized. If you're still interested in dinner, 7 p.m. Milton Street. No obligation. No obligation. Like this hadn't been building for 2 months. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. I'll be there. He wasn't wearing a suit when I arrived. No tie. No blazer. Just dark jeans and a fitted black shirt. Casual. Intentional. He looked younger, or maybe just freer. Daniel, he said as I approached. George. No hesitation this time. We didn't shake hands. We didn't hug. But the way he looked at me was different from every look he'd given me before. Unfiltered. Inside the restaurant, the lighting was low and warm. Not crowded. Just quiet enough for conversation to feel intimate. For the first 20 minutes, we talked like normal people. Work. Research. His background, he'd moved cities 3 years ago. My plans after graduation. It almost felt easy, until there was a pause. And the ease shifted into something heavier. We don't have to rush this, he said calmly, fingers loosely wrapped around his glass. I don't want to rush it. But you want it. Yes. No games. Just honesty. He studied me carefully. You've been very patient, I said quietly. I had to be. No, I corrected gently. You chose to be. His gaze sharpened slightly at that. Yes, he admitted. I did. The waiter cleared plates. The world moved around us like normal. You're aware, he said softly, that this changes the dynamic. There is no dynamic anymore. There's always a dynamic. Then let's redefine it. That made him pause. How? He asked. No classroom. No authority. Just 2 men deciding if they want the same thing. And if we don't? He asked quietly. Then we walk away. Simple. But not easy. He leaned back slightly, studying me like he had in class, except now there was no professional barrier softening it. You've surprised me, he said. By being gay? A slight shake of his head. By being steady. That caught me off guard. You expected me not to be? I expected impulse, he admitted. You're 22. And you've handled this with more control than I did. That was the first time he'd admitted that. You struggled, I asked. I've been thinking, he said. That's dangerous. Faint smirk. Yes, well, it's a habit. I waited. I don't want this to be something that exists in secret corners, he continued. I won't hide you. That surprised me. You don't have to announce it either. I know, but there's a difference between privacy and concealment. I studied him. You're okay with people knowing? I'm okay with living honestly. That wasn't dramatic. It was simple, and it meant more than I expected. Are you? He asked gently. Yes, I said, and I was, because this didn't feel reckless anymore. Felt chosen. The first time we ran into someone from campus together was 2 weeks later. Not holding hands. Not being obvious. Just walking side by side down Milton Street again. The same street where everything shifted. A junior from my ethics class walked past and did a subtle double take. Professor, he nodded. George returned the nod calmly. No panic. No distance created. Just normal. When the student was out of earshot, I glanced at him. You're calm. I told you, he said evenly. No hiding. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't showy. It was grounded. And somehow that made this feel safer than if we tried to bury it. People did talk eventually. Not loudly. Not scandalously. Just curiosity. Didn't you have him last semester? Yeah. That's bold. But there was no scandal, no ethics violation. The timeline was clean, and George handled it the same way he handled everything, with composure. In public, he was professional. In private, he was attentive, thoughtful, less rigid than I'd imagined. One night, months later, we ended up back outside that same bookstore. Closed again. Quiet street. He stopped under the same flickering street lamp. "You know," he said, glancing at the spot where Leo and I had been standing that night, "if I hadn't walked down this street, you would have kept pretending," I finished. "Yes." I looked at him. "Would that have been easier?" "Probably." "And," he stepped closer, not urgently, just naturally, "but it wouldn't have been honest." I smiled slightly. "You really value that word." "I do." His hand slipped into mine this time. No hesitation, no hovering, just contact. "You changed more than you think," he said quietly. "How?" "You forced me to confront the difference between discipline and denial. That sat with me. And you," he added, "stopped seeing yourself as someone who had to shrink around authority." He wasn't wrong, because somewhere between that bookstore and this moment, I stopped feeling like the younger one trying to prove something. I just felt like me.